History holds secrets about movement we cannot explain. We are about to journey through 30 unsolved mysteries of ancient transportation, a voyage that will permanently change how you see our ancestors' capabilities. By the end, you will possess a new perspective on human ingenuity and the lingering puzzles of our past. How did entire civilizations move stones heavier than modern trucks across impossible distances? Why do ancient maps appear to show lands they could not possibly have known? The answers are not simple, and some may not exist at all. What does it say about us that the greatest achievements of the past remain just out of our understanding? The sheer distance involved is the first staggering fact. Over 150 miles of rugged, ancient landscape separated the source of the stones from their final, sacred resting place. These are not the giant sarsen stones that form the outer circle, which were dragged from a more local quarry some 20 miles away. No, the blue stones, the smaller inner pillars with their distinctive blue-gray hue when wet, came from the Preseli Hills in what is now Wales. Each one weighs up to 4 tons, the equivalent of 2 large family cars, and there are dozens of them. For a people without the wheel, without metal tools, and without draft animals beyond perhaps dogs, this undertaking seems almost supernatural. The leading theory is one of pure, grinding human effort. Imagine teams of people using ropes made of plant fiber or leather, heaving these multi-ton monoliths onto wooden sledges. They would then have dragged these sledges over log rollers, constantly moving the rear logs to the front in a painstaking, rhythmic process. The route, avoiding the steepest hills, might have followed natural valleys and dry riverbeds. Some calculations suggest a single stone could have required well over 100 people to move it, and the journey could have taken months. Every mile would have been a testament to communal will, a slow-motion pilgrimage across the land. But the land route is only half the story. A more controversial idea suggests our ancestors were not just walkers but sailors. The so-called water transport theory proposes that the stones were hauled on sledges to a river, loaded onto rafts and floated along the Welsh coast, then up the River Avon, getting much closer to Salisbury Plain. This would have required an incredible understanding of buoyancy, tide and current. Could Neolithic people have built rafts sturdy enough for such a load? There is no archaeological evidence of such vessels from that time, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is a compelling image, these sacred stones gliding silently on water, their journey mirroring the spiritual flow from one realm to another. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not the how, but the why. Why go to such impossible lengths? The Preseli Hills were already a sacred landscape dotted with ancient monuments. They could have built their circle right there, so what compelled them to undertake this monumental effort? Some archaeologists point to the stones themselves, suggesting they were believed to hold healing properties or were intrinsically linked to the ancestors. The act of moving them, the shared struggle and sacrifice over generations, may have been the entire point. The journey infused the stones with meaning, transforming mere rock into a repository of communal memory and spiritual power. The physical feat, then, becomes a secondary echo of a deeper, more profound transportation, the movement of belief from one place to another, made permanent in stone. From the spiritual pilgrimage of Stonehenge's blue stones, we travel to a feat of engineering so vast it defies belief. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a silent monument to a mystery of movement on an almost unimaginable scale. Built for Pharaoh Khufu around 4,500 years ago, it is composed of roughly 2.3 million limestone blocks. Each of these blocks weighs, on average, 2.5 tons, about the same as a large pickup truck. And while the quarries were relatively close, just a few hundred meters to the south, the logistics of moving that many trucks worth of stone, stacking them with breathtaking precision, remains one of history's most enduring puzzles. The sheer volume is the first staggering hurdle. To complete the pyramid within Khufu's estimated reign of about 20 to 30 years, workers would have needed to quarry, shape, transport, and set one block every 2 to 3 minutes of every single working day. This was not a sporadic effort, but a continuous, deafening, decades-long symphony of organized labor. So how did they manage the transportation leg of this impossible task? A vivid clue comes from a tomb painting discovered in the tomb of Jehutihotep, a provincial governor. It shows a massive statue being pulled on a wooden sledge by a team of workers. And right there, at the feet of the laborers, a figure is pouring liquid onto the sand in front of the sledge. For a long time, this was thought to be a ceremonial act. But modern physics has revealed a stunning practicality. Researchers have demonstrated that wetting sand dramatically reduces friction. The water forms capillary bridges between the grains of sand, making them stick together. This prevents sand from piling up in front of the sledge, creating a firm, slick surface. The difference is extraordinary, cutting the required pulling force by as much as half. Imagine teams of workers hauling sledges along specially prepared causeways, their path constantly dampened by water carriers. This simple, brilliant technique could have turned an impossible drag into a manageable, if still Herculean, task. Yet, moving the blocks to the base of the pyramid is only half the battle. The greater mystery is how they were lifted to ever-increasing heights. The traditional theory of a single, long, straight ramp winding around the pyramid's exterior faces a material problem. Such a ramp, by the time it reached the top layers, would have required almost as much building material as the pyramid itself, and there's little archaeological evidence for its remains. This has led to a compelling alternative, the theory of an internal ramp. Proposed by architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, this idea suggests the builders constructed a straight external ramp for the lower third of the pyramid. Then, as the structure rose, they began building a corkscrewing ramp inside the pyramid's very body, tunneling upward within the already placed blocks. This internal ramp would have been dark and cramped, with teams maneuvering blocks around tight corners, but it solves the material issue and explains why no massive ramp ruins have been found. It paints a picture of the pyramid growing from the inside out, a hollow mountain being filled with its own construction pathway. Finally, we arrive at the precision. These multi-ton blocks were not just dumped into place. They were fitted together with joints so tight that, in many places, a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. This indicates not just brute force, but an astonishing level of logistical planning and skilled craftsmanship. The coordination required to deliver the right block to the right place at the right time, hundreds of feet in the air, suggests a lost science of project management. Were there master architects with detailed plans we can no longer decipher? Did they possess techniques for temporarily reducing weight or manipulating stone that have simply vanished from history? The pyramid stands as a testament not merely to moving stone, but to moving it with a purpose and precision that still whispers of secrets we have yet to fully hear. But the pyramids were not the only civilization obsessed with moving mountains. Far across the world, on the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, another culture performed a transportation miracle with far fewer resources. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a speck of land in the vast Pacific Ocean, over 1,000 miles from its nearest neighbor. And here, the people carved and transported the moai, those haunting giant stone heads that stare silently inland. Nearly 1,000 of these statues exist, with the largest standing over 30 feet tall and weighing a staggering 82 tons. The mystery is not just how they were carved from the volcanic rock of the Rono-Raraku quarry, but how they were moved up to 11 miles across rugged terrain to their coastal stone platforms called ahu. For generations, the dominant theory involved a more conventional method. It was believed islanders used a system of log rollers and ropes, laying the moai on a wooden sledge and pulling it over a path of felled trees. This idea seemed to solve the puzzle, but it created a far greater one, the island's ecological collapse. Easter Island was once covered in a lush palm forest. If every statue required a road of logs, the sheer scale of the transportation would have consumed the entire forest. This narrative painted a tragic picture, a society so driven by monument building that it literally deforested itself into ruin, the silent moai becoming tombstones for a fallen culture. The transportation method was answered, but at a devastating cost. Then, a radical new theory emerged, one pulled not from Western engineering, but from the island's own oral tradition. Legends passed down for centuries spoke of the statues walking to their platforms. For a long time, this was dismissed as pure myth, but what if it was a literal description? Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo proposed a revolutionary idea. They suggested the moai were not dragged horizontally, but were engineered to stand upright and be walked. Their experiments showed that with 3 teams of ropes, one on each side to rock the statue, and one behind to control the tilt and prevent a catastrophic fall, a multi-ton moai could indeed be made to sway side to side, pivoting on its curved base. With a rhythmic, coordinated pull, the statue would appear to waddle forward, step by precarious step. This method would require far fewer people and, critically, no logs at all. It transformed the story from one of ecological folly to one of breathtaking ingenuity. The statues did not cause the deforestation. They walked over a landscape already changing due to other factors. Yet, the walking theory is not without its critics. Some argue the bases of many moai show where patterns consistent with horizontal dragging. Others point out the incredible risk. A single slip could shatter a statue that took a generation to carve. Perhaps the truth is a combination, a clever people using every method at their disposal. The real transportation mystery of Easter Island may not be a single lost technique, but a lost philosophy. What drove this isolated community to dedicate such a colossal portion of its energy and identity to this endeavor? Each moai represented a deified ancestor, a protective presence. Moving them was not a construction project, it was a sacred procession, a way of bringing the watchful eyes of the past into the heart of the present. The societal cost was immense, but perhaps in their eyes, the cost of not moving them, of leaving the ancestors trapped in the quarry, was unthinkably greater. The silent moai hold their secret close, a testament to what humans will move and what they will sacrifice for a connection that transcends the physical world. Even the mighty pyramids and the walking moai seem almost manageable compared to the stones of Baalbek. In the lush Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, the ruins of a magnificent Roman temple complex stand atop a foundation that makes no sense. The Romans were master engineers, yes, but the platform they built upon contains stones that push the very definition of possible. The most famous are the 3 blocks known as the trilithon. Each one is over 60 feet long, 14 feet high, and 10 feet wide. They weigh approximately 800 tons. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of 2 fully loaded jumbo jets or 200 of the largest elephants you can imagine. And they are fitted together with a precision that would challenge modern machinery, forming the base of the Temple of Jupiter. The Romans clearly placed them, but the how remains shrouded in mystery. The conventional explanation involves an army of laborers, a forest of wooden cranes and levers, and an immense system of ramps. They would have quarried the stone from a nearby hillside, then slowly, incrementally, inched it along a prepared road on rollers using winches and human power. It is a theory of brute force and brilliant logistics, yet when you stand before these monoliths, the theory feels insufficient. The scale is so vast it seems to mock our understanding of ancient capability. But the trilithon is not even the largest stone. A short distance from the temple complex, still lying in its quarry, is the true champion of this mystery. It is called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, a name from local legend. This single, unfinished block is estimated to weigh over 1,000 tons. It is longer than a blue whale. The idea of moving such a mass, even a few hundred yards, with the technology we attribute to the Romans, borders on the fantastical. How do you even begin to lever a 1,000-ton block onto a sledge? What kind of ropes could withstand the tension? How many men could physically fit around it to pull? The numbers become absurd, suggesting either a lost piece of engineering genius or a different story altogether. This leads to the most intriguing layer of the Baalbek puzzle. While the Romans built the glorious temples on top, many researchers believe the massive foundation platform and the truly gigantic stones within it are far older. The site was sacred long before Rome existed, known as a place of worship for the Phoenician god Baal. Could an earlier, unknown civilization have quarried and positioned these megaliths? The Romans were famous for repurposing existing sacred sites, building their own monuments atop the foundations of the conquered. If true, then the mystery deepens exponentially. Who were these people? What knowledge did they possess that allowed them to manipulate stone like clay? Some have pointed to the sheer size and the method of quarrying, which involves separating the block from the bedrock by carving channels around it, a technique seen in other ancient pre-Roman sites. The stone of the pregnant woman still sits in its trench, partially detached, as if the workers simply walked away one day, leaving a question mark carved in limestone. The silence of that abandoned stone is deafening. It speaks of a project so ambitious it was perhaps never completed, or of a technology that was lost before the final act. Baalbek forces us to confront a humbling possibility. We assume linear progress in engineering, that techniques get more advanced over time. But what if knowledge is sometimes lost, that a peak of megalithic technology was reached in a forgotten age, and the Romans, for all their brilliance, were merely inheritors using a foundation they themselves could not replicate? The stones do not answer. They simply lie there in the sun of the Bikar Valley, a permanent testament to a weight of history we are still struggling to lift. The stones of Baalbek represent a mystery of moving weight, but what about a civilization that moved meaning across a vast, empty canvas? Far to the south, etched into the arid plains of Peru, the Nazca Lines present a transportation enigma of an entirely different kind. These are not monuments to be moved, but pathways that are the monument itself, created by the Nazca culture between 500 BC and 500 AD. These geoglyphs consist of hundreds of straight lines, geometric shapes, and intricate depictions of animals and plants, some stretching over 600 feet across. They are so massive their full form can only be appreciated from the air, a fact that has fueled endless speculation about ancient astronauts and lost technologies. But the most grounded and perhaps most profound mysteries involve how these lines might have guided movement across a landscape of extreme scarcity. One compelling theory is that the lines were not just art to be seen, but roads to be walked. Many of the long, straight lines cut across the desert for miles, cleared of dark surface stones to expose the lighter earth beneath. Archaeologists like Johann Reinhard have proposed these were sacred pathways used for ritual processions. Imagine a community gathering, walking single file along the precise border of a giant hummingbird or spider, their footsteps tracing the outline of a deity. The act of walking the line would have been a form of worship, a physical journey that mirrored a spiritual one. The destination might have been a ceremonial mound or a place where offerings were made to the gods, perhaps for the most precious resource of all, water. This transforms the lines from static images into dynamic scripts, written not with ink but with human movement over generations. This leads to the most practical theory of transportation. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on Earth. Survival depended on finding and managing water, which flowed from the Andes through underground aquifers and surfaced in oases. Remarkably, many of the long lines and trapezoids point directly toward sources of water in the distant foothills. Researcher David Johnson has argued the Nazca Lines are a vast hydrological map. specific line might point toward a mountain spring, while a particular animal glyph could mark the location of an underground water channel. In a landscape with few landmarks, these giant symbols would have served as an unmissable guide, a public utility etched into the earth itself. A traveler knowing the code could look at the giant monkey or the sweeping trapezoid and know which direction to walk to find life-giving water. This turns the entire plateau into a functional survival guide, a testament to moving not just bodies but vital knowledge across a hostile terrain. But could the map have been even grander? Some researchers see a celestial connection. Certain lines align with the rising or setting points of the sun, moon, and significant stars during solstices. The famous spider glyph is thought by some to be a representation of the constellation Orion. If the lines are indeed tied to the stars, their purpose might have been one of cosmic navigation. By aligning their pathways with the heavens, the Nazca could have used the stars to orient themselves not just for seasonal ceremonies, but for long-distance travel across the featureless desert. The ground and the sky would have been in constant dialogue, one mirroring the other. A procession walking a line toward the setting sun on a specific day would be participating in a calendar event, moving in time as well as space. The enduring mystery is that all these purposes could be true simultaneously. The lines could have been ceremonial roads, hydrological maps, and astronomical calendars, their meaning layered like the desert sediments. They represent a different kind of transportation technology, one that moves information, faith, and community across a canvas of stone and sand. Unlike the single destination of a pyramid stone or a moai, the Nazca Lines are about the journey itself, permanently inscribed into the earth. They ask us to consider that the greatest journeys are not always about moving objects from point A to point B, but about encoding the very knowledge of how to survive, worship, and find your way in a vast and indifferent world. The silent pathways of Nazca guide us toward a landscape where the stones themselves seem to defy the tools that shape them. High in the Bolivian Andes, near the shores of Lake Titicaca, lie the ruins of Pumapunku, a site that shatters our assumptions about ancient construction. This is not a monument of colossal, rough-hewn blocks, but one of terrifying precision. The stonework here, carved from dense andesite and striking red sandstone, looks less like it was chiseled by hand and more like it was manufactured. The surfaces are flawlessly flat, the edges razor-sharp, and the corners are perfect 90-degree angles, but the true heart of the mystery lies in the joints. Scattered across the site are H-shaped blocks featuring a series of complex geometric recesses and protrusions. These are not simple slots. They are intricate, interlocking fittings, some with as many as 80 individual faces, each cut to a tolerance of less than a millimeter. It is a modular construction system, a kind of ancient stone Lego, designed to fit together with a seamless, earthquake-resistant bond without the need for mortar. The craftsmanship is so exact that modern engineers struggle to explain how it was achieved with the presumed tools of the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished here over 1,000 years ago. They had no iron, no steel. Their hardest metal was bronze, too soft to cut andesite, one of the hardest stones on Earth. The prevailing theory suggests a relentless process of abrasion, using sand, water, and countless hours of grinding with stone or copper tools. Yet, the scale and perfection of the work make this explanation feel almost as monumental as the stones themselves. Each block represents an unimaginable investment of time and a silent, vanished expertise. But before these stones could be fitted together with such impossible care, they first had to arrive at the site. This presents the parallel transportation mystery. The andesite was quarried from a site over 10 miles away across the rugged Altiplano, a high-altitude plain. The largest of these blocks weigh well over 100 tons. The Tiwanaku people, like many Andean cultures, did not use the wheel for transportation, and they had no draft animals like oxen or horses in this region. The llama, their primary beast of burden, can carry only about 100 pounds. moving a 100-ton block would require the coordinated pull of thousands of people. The most logical theory involves a combination of earthen ramps, ropes made from llama hide or plant fibers, and a vast army of laborers using wooden levers and rollers. They might have used the slight downhill grade from the quarry to the lakeshore to their advantage, carefully controlling the descent of these monolithic slabs. Yet, picturing this scene raises profound questions. The logistics are staggering. How did they feed and organize such a workforce at an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet, where the air is thin and physical exertion is brutally taxing? How did they maintain the morale and coordination to move dozens of these perfect blocks over such a distance? The sheer communal effort implies a society of extraordinary unity and purpose, one where moving stone was central to their identity. This leads to the most haunting possibility. The flawless, modular nature of the stonework suggests something beyond brute force logistics. It hints at a standardized system, a pre-planned architecture where every block had a predetermined place. This level of sophistication in design and execution seems to leap ahead of what we typically attribute to ancient Andean cultures. It feels, in a word, anachronistic. This perceived gap between the assumed technology and the achieved result has understandably fueled endless speculation. Could the Tiwanaku have possessed a lost knowledge of softening stone or using advanced vibrational tools, secrets that vanished with their civilization? Or does Pumapunku stand as a quiet, stone-cold rebuke to our own historical timelines, evidence that human ingenuity can achieve near perfection with simple tools, immense patience, and a vision we have simply forgotten how to see? The scattered blocks, now tumbled by time and perhaps a cataclysmic earthquake, lie like the pieces of a puzzle we no longer have the instructions to solve. The impossible stonework of Pumapunku finds a watery echo in the middle of the Pacific. On the remote island of Pohnpei, a city rises not from solid ground, but from a labyrinth of tidal canals and silent, seaweed-choked ruins. This is Nan Madol, a Venice built of stone in an age before mortar. Its foundations are not earth, but over 90 artificial islets, each one painstakingly constructed from millions of basalt logs. These are not small stones. Each column is a hexagonal or octagonal prism, quarried from the volcanic bedrock elsewhere on the island. They weigh up to 50 tons, and they are stacked crosswise like colossal, geological Lincoln logs to form towering walls that rise directly from the water. The first mystery is the quarry itself. The basalt comes from the opposite side of Pohnpei, in some cases miles away across dense jungle and rugged terrain. How do you move a 50-ton stone log without wheels, without metal, and without large draft animals? The local legend offers a poetic answer. It tells of two brother magicians, Olasipa and Olasopa, who summoned a great dragon to fly the stones through the air, placing them with supernatural precision. It is a story that perfectly captures the sheer impossibility witnessed by later generations. But we must search for a more grounded, though no less extraordinary, truth. The most plausible theory involves turning the island's greatest challenge into its primary highway, water. Pohnpei is fringed by a vast network of mangrove forests and natural canals. Researchers propose that the massive basalt columns were first levered onto wooden sledges and dragged to the nearest waterway. There, they would have been carefully loaded onto enormous bamboo rafts stabilized by outriggers. Teams of paddlers would then have navigated these precarious, top-heavy cargoes through the maze of mangrove channels, using the tides to assist them, eventually poling their way into the shallow lagoon where Nan Madol was to be built. The engineering foresight here is breathtaking. It means the builders didn't just construct a city, they first engineered an entire transportation network, a liquid roadmap of canals that served as the conveyor belt for their ambition. Yet, the water theory, while elegant, only deepens the logistical puzzle. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Estimates suggest the city's construction required moving a total mass of nearly 750,000 tons of stone. Each raft journey was a gamble against the waves, a slow-motion ballet of balance and brute force. How many columns were lost to the murky depths during transit? How many rafts and how many men did it take to coordinate just a single delivery? The societal effort implies a ruler, the Saudeleur dynasty, with absolute control over every able-bodied person on the island for generations. This was not a project, it was the entire purpose of the civilization. And then we must confront the final, silent act of the mystery, the stacking. Once a raft arrived at the designated islet, the real challenge began. How did they lift these multi-ton logs, some over 20 feet long, and slot them into place, often high above the waterline? The prevailing idea involves a system of ramps, levers, and floating platforms. As the walls grew higher, they might have built earthen ramps from the surrounding seafloor, or used the rising tide to float rafts into position, then dropping the stones as the water receded. It is a picture of relentless, rhythmic effort synchronized with the very pulse of the ocean. Nan Madol stands as a monument not to stone but to water's patience. It is a city that confesses its own method of birth, every canal a testament to the journey its bones undertook. The stones did not fly, but in a very real sense they swam, carried on the backs of a people who moved mountains, log by log, across a liquid landscape. The interlocking stones of Nan Madol find a terrestrial cousin in the mountains of Peru, where a fortress wall defies both invasion and explanation. High above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, the zigzagging ramparts of Sacsayhuaman stand as a monumental jigsaw puzzle carved from the living rock. These are not mere blocks, but behemoths of limestone and andesite, some weighing well over 100 tons, each one a unique, irregular polygon. They are stacked 3 tiers high, their faces sloping inward like the prow of a stone ship, and they fit together with a precision so tight that, centuries later, you cannot slip a piece of paper between them. The first question is one of sheer mass. How did a civilization without the wheel, without iron tools, and without draft animals like horses or oxen, move these mountains from quarries several miles away and up the steep hillsides to this strategic perch? The answer lies in a symphony of human coordination and simple, brilliant physics. The Inca were masters of the rope, crafting immense cables from grasses and leather that could withstand colossal tension. The most likely method involved hundreds, perhaps thousands, of workers using these ropes to pull the stones on wooden sledges or rollers, but the terrain was not flat. They would have constructed earthen ramps, packing soil against the growing walls to create inclined planes up which the stones could be painstakingly inched, lever by lever, pull by pull. It was a process of incremental victory where every inch gained was a testament to communal will. Yet, transportation is only half the miracle of Sacsayhuaman. The true genius is in the fitting. These stones are not uniform bricks. Each one is a custom piece, its neighbors carved to match its contours with mind-bending accuracy. How was this achieved? The leading theory involves a process of trial and error that feels almost artistic. Stonemasons would have roughly shaped a block at the quarry. After its grueling journey to the site, it would be placed near its intended spot. Then the real work began. Using harder stone hammers and abrasive sand, workers would have slowly, meticulously dressed the contacting faces. They likely used a technique of repetition, coating the face of the already set stone with a pigment, then lowering the new block against it. Where the pigment transferred indicated the high points that needed to be ground down. This process would be repeated dozens, maybe hundreds of times, a slow dance of lowering, checking, and grinding until the two faces married perfectly. The result is a wall that behaves as a single, elastic entity during earthquakes. Instead of rigid mortar joints that crack and fail, these interlocking stones can shift and settle during tremors, then settle back into place, locked by their own unique geometry. This suggests the Inca weren't just moving stone, they were engineering with a deep, almost intuitive understanding of seismic forces. they transported not just rock but a concept, a living architecture designed to dance with the unstable earth beneath it. The walls of Sacsayhuaman are therefore more than a fortress. They are a frozen record of a logistical network capable of delivering these gigantic puzzle pieces, and a school of stonemasonry that turned brute stone into a breathable, resilient skin for the mountain itself. From the earthquake-defying walls of the Andes, we descend into the silent, sun-drenched shallows of the Atlantic. Just off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, a discovery lies beneath the turquoise waves that has divided scientists and ignited imaginations for decades. Known as the Bimini Road, it is a striking formation of hundreds of rectangular limestone blocks, arranged in a long, curved line over half a mile long. Seen from above, it looks uncannily like a paved highway or the collapsed foundation of a massive wall, disappearing into the blue haze. The immediate, almost irresistible question is whether we are looking at the handiwork of nature or the drowned ruins of a forgotten people. The answer depends entirely on who you ask, and it reveals a fundamental clash between geology and a deep human longing to find lost worlds. Geologists point to a perfectly natural, if fascinating, process. The blocks, they argue, are a prime example of beak rock. This is a type of sandstone that forms in tropical shorelines when loose sand and shell fragments become cemented together by calcium carbonate, essentially natural concrete, as fresh water percolates through it. Over time, as sea levels rise or the coastline shifts, this cemented layer can fracture along natural joints and planes, creating what appear to be neatly cut blocks. The curved shape of the Bimini Road could follow an ancient fossilized shoreline. The uniformity, they say, is an illusion created by the consistent forces of erosion and fracture. To support this, they note the blocks are composed of local stone and show no clear signs of tool marks, quarrying, or stacking, no clear fingerprints of human construction. It is, in their view, a magnificent geological accident, a trick of the eye played by time and tide. But for archaeologists and alternative historians, the formation is too orderly, too purposeful to dismiss. They counter that the blocks appear to be placed in a deliberate, two-tiered arrangement, with some smaller stones seemingly used as supports or shims beneath the larger slabs. The sheer scale and linear precision feel architectural. If this is indeed man-made, the implications are staggering. The Bimini Road lies in water shallow enough that it would have been dry land during the last ice age, when global sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. This places its possible construction window between roughly 10,000 and 6,000 years ago, a time when mainstream archaeology tells us no advanced seafaring civilization existed in this region. Who could have built it? The most tantalizing connection is to the legend of Atlantis, Plato's story of a sophisticated island empire that sank beneath the ocean in a single day and night. While most scholars treat Atlantis as philosophical allegory, the discovery of a seemingly artificial structure on a sunken landmass inevitably fuels the speculation. Could this be a fragment of a lost causeway, a pier for a harbor that no longer exists, or even part of a ceremonial complex? The purpose, if human, is another layer of the puzzle. A popular theory suggests it was a breakwater or a dock designed to protect boats in a now-vanished lagoon. Others see it as a ceremonial road leading to a temple or sacred site that now lies further out to sea. Without associated artifacts, tools, pottery, or human remains, the structure stands in silent isolation, a question mark carved in stone. The debate itself is a kind of intellectual transportation, moving us between the solid ground of established science and the alluring depths of historical possibility. It forces us to ask how we define evidence and what we are willing to accept when a mystery resists a tidy explanation. The Bimini Road may never surrender its secret. It rests there, just below the surface, a pathway that leads nowhere and everywhere at once, inviting us to walk with our imaginations along its sunken stones. Deep beneath the sunken stones of Bimini lies a different kind of treasure, one not lost to the sea but seemingly vanished into thin air. Far to the north, along the rugged shores of Lake Superior, a silent industry once roared. For thousands of years, ancient Native American peoples mined pure copper directly from the bedrock. This was not a small-scale operation. They removed an estimated 500 million pounds of the metal, digging pits that still scar the landscape today. The mystery is not the mining itself, but a simple, baffling question. Where did all that copper go? In the archaeological record of North America, we find only a tiny fraction of this colossal output fashioned into local tools and ornaments. The rest, thousands upon thousands of tons of pure, malleable metal, appears to have simply disappeared. This vanishing act forms the core of one of archaeology's most provocative transportation puzzles. How do you lose a mountain of copper, one compelling and highly controversial? Theory suggests it was never lost at all. It was shipped out. The proposal is staggering in its implications. Could this North American copper have been the engine for the European Bronze Age? The timeline is hauntingly parallel. The most intensive mining around Lake Superior occurred between 3000 and 5000 BC, precisely when copper, and later tin to make bronze, became the most sought-after commodities across the Atlantic. In Europe and the Mediterranean, local copper sources were often scarce and impure. The Lake Superior copper, by contrast, is over 99% pure, a naturally occurring metal so clean it can be worked without smelting. The sheer volume missing from America would have been more than enough to supply the booming demand of the Old World. But a theory needs evidence, and here science offers a tantalizing clue. Modern researchers can use a technique called isotopic analysis. Like a geological fingerprint, the lead isotopes trapped within a copper artifact can sometimes be traced back to its original ore source. A few studies have claimed to match the unique signature of Lake Superior copper in a handful of Bronze Age artifacts found in Europe and the Mediterranean. These findings are hotly debated, with many scientists pointing to potential overlaps with European ore signatures or questioning the analysis. Yet, if even one such match were conclusively proven, it would rewrite our understanding of the ancient world. It suggests a transoceanic trade route of unimaginable scale and daring, operating millennia before Columbus. This idea forces us to confront the practicalities. How could such a trade possibly work, transporting tons of heavy, dense metal across the Atlantic in prehistoric times seems like a logistical fantasy. Proponents point to the maritime capabilities we often underestimate. We know that ancient peoples were accomplished sailors. The Polynesians navigated the vast Pacific. The Phoenicians sailed the Mediterranean and beyond. Could a similar, now forgotten culture have mastered the North Atlantic? The journey would have followed the natural conveyor belts of the ocean. One proposed route hugs the northern coastline, crossing from Labrador to Greenland, then hopping to Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and finally Scotland. This stepping stone route, while brutally cold, would have kept land almost always in sight. Another, more daring path would have utilized the powerful Gulf Stream, a natural river in the ocean flowing eastward from North America toward Europe. A vessel caught in this current could have made the crossing with sustained effort, perhaps following migratory birds or star patterns known to both continents. The vessels themselves remain speculative. They would need to be large, stable, and capable of carrying a cargo of raw copper ingots, likely lashed in the hull. We have no surviving examples of such transoceanic craft from that era in the Americas, but absence of evidence, as we have seen, is a fragile foundation for denial. Perhaps they were built from materials like wood and hide that simply did not survive the centuries. The social implications are even more profound. Such a trade would not be a one-off voyage of discovery, but a sustained, generations-long enterprise. It implies established relationships, trading posts, and a shared understanding of value between vastly different cultures. Who were the intermediaries? Were there entire communities whose purpose was to move this sacred metal from the interior mines to the coast, and from the coast across the ocean? The copper's journey would have been a chain of human connection, each link a story lost to time. Ultimately, the Lake Superior copper mystery challenges a deeply held bias in our view of history. We are comfortable with the idea of ancient globalization across Eurasia, the Silk Road, the spice trade. But we often subconsciously place the Americas in a bubble, isolated until 1492. This mystery whispers of a different past, one where the Atlantic was not a barrier but a highway. It asks us to consider that the most profound transportation in history might not be the movement of stones, but the movement of an idea that value and desire could flow between worlds long before maps said it was possible. The empty pits by the Great Lakes stand as silent sentinels, not of what was taken, but of the vast, invisible network that might have carried it away. The silent copper trade hints at voyages guided by stars and currents. But what if ancient sailors possessed a tool far more sophisticated than a simple star chart? In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera stumbled upon a shipwreck from the 1st century BC. Amidst the statues and pottery, they found a corroded lump of bronze and wood that would become one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of all time. After decades of study, including advanced X-ray imaging, the lump revealed itself as the Antikythera mechanism, a complex assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears housed in a wooden case. It is, without exaggeration, the world's first known analog computer. Its primary purpose, deciphered from tiny inscriptions on its fragments, was to model the cosmos. It could predict the positions of the sun and moon, track the phases of the moon, and even forecast eclipses. It displayed the movements of the 5 known planets and marked the timing of major athletic games like the Olympics. This alone rewrites our understanding of ancient Greek technology, but a deeper mystery lingers within its intricate gears. Could this device, recovered from a trading vessel, have been a practical tool for navigation? The Mediterranean was the highway of the ancient world, and safe passage depended on understanding the sky. A captain could use the mechanism to know the precise phase of the moon, which affects tides, or to confirm the position of constellations on any given night of the year. This would have been a powerful advantage, transforming celestial navigation from an art based on memory and experience into a more precise science. By turning a hand crank, a user could advance or reverse time on the device's dials, seeing a simulation of the night sky for a past or future date. Imagine a ship's navigator far from home, using this portable planetarium to verify his location or to plan the best time for a departure based on celestial events. The potential is breathtaking, yet the most tantalizing question is whether it could do more. Could the Antikythera mechanism have helped calculate longitude? Determining longitude at sea requires knowing the precise time difference between your current location and a fixed point, like your home port. It was a problem that famously stumped navigators until the invention of accurate marine chronometers in the 18th century. The Antikythera mechanism did track complex astronomical cycles with remarkable accuracy, and some researchers speculate that its gearing could have been used in conjunction with lunar eclipse predictions, a method known in theory but considered impractically complex for the era. If a navigator could observe a lunar eclipse and compare its timing to a prediction for, say, Alexandria, the difference would reveal his longitudinal displacement. The mechanism could generate those precise predictions. This suggests a level of applied scientific knowledge we simply did not attribute to the ancient world. The device is not a lone anomaly. Cicero, the Roman philosopher, wrote about similar instruments, describing a device built by Archimedes that could model planetary motions. This implies the Antikythera mechanism was part of a tradition, a peak of a technological curve that has otherwise been completely lost. Its presence on a merchant ship is the crucial clue. This was not a philosopher's toy locked in a library. It was a working instrument on a commercial voyage, traveling from the Greek world to Rome, likely as luxury cargo. Its very existence on that ship tells us that this knowledge was mobile, that the cutting-edge science of the age was physically transported across the sea, perhaps to be delivered to a wealthy patron or a scholarly community. The shipwreck then becomes a tragic time capsule. It did not just sink a cargo of art and wine, it sank an entire branch of mechanical genius. The knowledge to build such devices, the schools of thought that designed them, the craftsmen who painstakingly cut those tiny brass gears, all seem to have vanished in the subsequent centuries of war and social collapse. We are left with a haunting fragment, a glimpse of a path not taken. The Antikythera mechanism stands as a profound reminder that technology is not a straight upward line. It can be lost, its secrets sinking beneath the waves, leaving future generations to wonder at the sophistication of those who came before. This one recovered device whispers of countless others that did not survive, of journeys made safer and more certain by a turning of bronze gears under the vast starry sky. The intricate gears of the Antikythera mechanism represent a pinnacle of ancient engineering, but for another culture of legendary sailors, the key to navigation was not brass but crystal. Norse sagas speak of a magical tool called the solarstein or sunstone. Viking captains, the tales say, could hold this stone to the sky on completely overcast days, or even after the sun had dipped below the horizon, and still determine its hidden position. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure myth, a charming metaphor for a navigator's intuition. But modern science has revealed a startling possibility. The sunstone may have been a real physical tool, and its power lay in a property of light invisible to the naked eye: polarization. Light from the sun scatters as it passes through Earth's atmosphere, and this scattering creates a subtle pattern of polarized light waves vibrating in a specific direction. This pattern is symmetrical around the sun, forming a kind of invisible compass in the sky. Our eyes cannot detect it, but certain transparent crystals can. The prime candidate is a mineral known as Iceland spar, a form of calcite that is cleaved into perfect rhomboid shapes. This crystal has a remarkable property called birefringence. When you look through a piece of Iceland spar at a light source, you see a double image, but here is the navigational magic. If you rotate the crystal while pointing it at a patch of clear sky, the intensity of the two images changes. When the crystal is aligned with the polarization pattern, the two images will appear equally bright. A skilled user, by slowly rotating the stone and watching for this moment of equilibrium, could deduce the sun's bearing even if the sun itself was completely hidden behind cloud or fog. To understand how this might have worked in practice, picture a Viking Nar, a sturdy trading ship in the middle of the North Atlantic. The sky is a uniform, featureless gray. There are no stars, no visible sun, just the endless swell of the ocean. A seasoned navigator takes out his sunstone, a smooth piece of calcite perhaps kept in a leather pouch. He holds it up, peering through it at the zenith, the point in the sky directly overhead. He begins to turn the crystal slowly in his fingers, his eyes fixed on the twin images within. He seeks that point of balance. Once found, he marks the orientation of the crystal on the ship's deck or in relation to the keel. This gives him one line, one axis pointing toward the hidden sun. He might then take a second reading from a different part of the sky to cross-reference. With this information, he can establish a rough east-west line. Combined with his profound knowledge of sea currents, bird flight patterns, wave shapes, and the color of the water, this celestial clue could be enough to keep his ship on course for days. This was not a GPS. It was a subtle art requiring immense experience and likely used in conjunction with other methods, but it provides a compelling scientific basis for the sagas. The principle is so sound that in 2013, researchers published a study showing that using a calibrated piece of Iceland spar to check the sun's position could yield a bearing accurate to within a single degree. even when the sun was 4 degrees below the horizon. This last point is critical. In the high latitudes of the Viking world during the summer months, the sun might only briefly dip below the horizon, creating a prolonged twilight. A sunstone could extend the navigational day, allowing them to sail through the night using a sun they could not see. The implications for their legendary voyages are profound. With such a tool, the daunting journeys to Iceland, Greenland, and eventually the coast of Newfoundland, a place they called Vinland, become more comprehensible. They were not simply wandering blindly across the ocean, hoping for a lucky break. They possessed a sophisticated understanding of their environment, harnessing the very physics of light to pierce the veil of weather. The magnetic compass, borrowed from other cultures, would not become common in northern Europe until centuries later. For a time, the Vikings may have navigated by a sun only they could find, their path illuminated by a crystal that turned myth into a tangible line across the sea. The crystal clarity of the Viking sunstone gives way to a far more cryptic guide, one whose instructions are stamped in clay but whose meaning remains stubbornly silent. On the sun-drenched island of Crete, within the ruins of the ancient Minoan palace of Phaistos, archaeologists uncovered a small, fired clay disc that has become one of the world's most famous and frustrating puzzles. The Phaistos disc, dating to around the 17th century BC, is a palm-sized circle covered on both sides with a spiraling sequence of symbols. These are not hand-drawn, but were stamped into the soft clay using individual seals, making this object one of the earliest known examples of movable type printing in human history, a technological leap that then seemingly vanished for millennia. The symbols themselves are a captivating gallery of the ancient world, 45 distinct pictograms featuring men with feathered headdresses, ships with tall masts, animals like birds and fish, tools, plants, and geometric shapes. They march in a tight spiral from the outer edge toward the center, divided into sections by incised lines. It looks like a message, a list, a story. But in over a century of study, no one has definitively deciphered it. The script it uses appears nowhere else, a linguistic island as isolated as Crete itself. This very uniqueness has led to a fascinating shift in thinking. Perhaps we have been looking at it the wrong way. What if the Phaistos disc is not a literary text to be read, but a logistical document to be used? One compelling theory suggests it is a travel guide. Consider the symbols. We see clear depictions of ships, a man walking, a man in a headdress that could denote status or a specific role, a shield, a captive, a city gate, a bee, a flower. This looks less like a poem or a royal decree and more like an inventory of things you might encounter or instructions for things you must do on a journey. Could each stamped segment represent a leg of a voyage, a stop on a processional route, or a list of supplies and protocols for a trading mission? The spiral format is particularly suggestive. It is a continuous path with a clear beginning and end. A traveler or a priest could hold the disc and follow the sequence with a finger, moving from the outside in, each pictogram acting as a waypoint. A ship symbol might indicate a sea crossing. A man with a staff could mean a day's march. A bee might symbolize a specific town known for its honey, or perhaps an offering that must be made there. A city gate pictogram could denote arrival at a major settlement. In this interpretation, the disc becomes a Bronze Age itinerary, a condensed portable database of a journey. It encoded not language but action and destination. This idea gains weight when we consider who the Minoans were. They were the preeminent naval power of their age, a thalassocracy whose wealth and influence flowed across the Mediterranean from their island hubs. Their palaces were administrative centers, managing complex trade networks that brought in copper, tin, ivory, and precious stones. The movement of goods and people was the lifeblood of their civilization. A standardized stamp-printed guide would be an incredibly efficient tool for such a society. It could be given to a ship's captain, a caravan leader, or a religious official undertaking an annual pilgrimage. Unlike a scroll that could tear or fade, the fired clay disc was durable, pocket-sized, and its stamped symbols were unambiguous. A ship is a ship, a gate is a gate. It transcended language barriers between different Minoan communities or even trading partners who had learned the basic pictographic code. The mystery deepens when we ask about its specific purpose. Some researchers propose it details a sacred procession, a ritual journey between temples or peak sanctuaries on Crete, with each symbol representing a prayer, an offering, or a ceremonial act to be performed at each stop. Others see it as a practical trader's almanac, listing ports of call, tariffs to be paid in specific commodities, or even safe anchorages. The inclusion of what looks like a shield and a captive has even sparked speculation about military logistics, a route for moving troops or hostages. Yet without the key, we are left tracing the spiral with our imaginations. The disc is a locked door, and every theory is a different shape of key. Its greatest power may be what it reveals about our own desire to understand. We look at this beautiful, intricate object and we cannot accept that its message is lost. We insist it must be a guide because the alternative, that it is a mundane inventory of temple goods, a child's toy, or a piece of forgotten art, feels like an affront to its sophistication. We want it to be a map because maps promise that even in a foreign land you can find your way. The Phaistos disc sits in its museum case, a perfect, silent spiral. It is a snapshot of a system, a fossilized thought. It reminds us that the most advanced technology of an era might not be the lever or the sail, but the method of recording information itself. This clay disc was a vehicle for knowledge, designed to transport instructions reliably across time and space. We have the vehicle, but we have forgotten how to drive, left to wonder about the journeys it once commanded. A carved stone panel in a dark Egyptian temple chamber seems to show something impossible. Within the crypts of the Hathor temple at Dendera, a bas-relief depicts a strange scene. A large, bulb-like object tapered at one end is held aloft by a pillar. Inside this bulb, a snake extends in a straight line, its head touching the tip of a flower stem held by a kneeling god. From the snake's tail, a cable-like line runs to a box upon which sits a baboon. To the modern eye, the resemblance to a giant filament-style light bulb is startling and immediate. It has become known in certain circles as the Dendera light bulb. The mainstream archaeological interpretation, however, is one of profound symbolism, not forgotten technology. Egyptologists identify the scene as a mythological representation of the birth of the sun god from a lotus flower, with the snake symbolizing the divine serpent of creation emerging into the world. The pillar is a jed pillar representing stability, and the baboon is a form of the god Thoth. The so-called cable is likely the lotus stem itself. In this view, the carving is a sacred diagram, a story of cosmic origins etched in stone. Yet the visual similarity is so uncanny that it has spawned a compelling and persistent what-if. What if we are looking at it too literally, but also not literally enough? Could the symbol be based on a real, observed phenomenon? The speculation asks whether ancient Egyptian priests might have possessed a form of electrical illumination, using primitive batteries or static generators to create light within the pitch-black depths of temple crypts and tombs. The concept is not entirely without a scientific toehold. Artifacts known as the Baghdad batteries, simple clay pots containing an iron rod inside a copper cylinder, could, in theory, produce a small electrical charge if filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or wine. While their actual purpose remains debated, their existence proves the ancients could have stumbled upon basic electrochemistry. Could a scaled-up version or a series of such cells have powered a fragile, glowing arc between two rods inside a glass vessel, creating the effect depicted? The practical challenges, however, are immense. Glass-blowing, as known to the Egyptians, produced small vessels, not large, sealed bulbs capable of holding a vacuum or controlled gas, which is essential for a long-lasting electric light. There is no archaeological evidence of such glassware, nor of the thin, durable metal filaments or electrodes needed. Furthermore, the relief shows no clear power source beyond the symbolic box and no switches or controls. The theory lies in a frustrating space between intriguing possibility and a complete absence of corroborating evidence. This leads to the greater, more speculative mystery this image touches upon. If not a light bulb, could it represent a different, entirely lost principle of energy? Fringe theories sometimes propose that ancient cultures harnessed earth energies, acoustic resonance, or even advanced crystalline technology to power tools or machinery. The dendera carving becomes a Rorschach test for these ideas. Perhaps the bulb is not a bulb at all, but a resonator, and the filament is a standing wave of energy made visible in sacred art. The cable might then be a conduit for this force drawn from the earth or the atmosphere. While firmly in the realm of speculation, this line of thinking addresses a nagging question about ancient megaprojects. How did workers illuminate the interiors of pyramids, tombs, and subterranean temples to execute their flawless carvings and paintings? The conventional answer is simple: mirrored sunlight and countless oil lamps or torches. But torches produce soot, and no soot stains have been found on the ceilings of many enclosed chambers like the Great Pyramid's interior. Mirrors of polished copper could reflect light, but over long, winding passages the light would grow dim. The dendera bulb offers a tantalizing, if unproven, alternative solution. The true transportation mystery embedded here is not of moving objects, but of moving power. If a civilization had access to a portable, bright, and clean light source, it would revolutionize construction logistics. Work could continue day and night deep inside structures. Detailed work in confined spaces would become far easier. The logistics of organizing thousands of laborers in dark, cramped quarters would transform. This imagined technology would be a tool not just for seeing, but for coordinating complex movement itself. It becomes a key to unlocking how other transportation miracles might have been orchestrated in the dark. Ultimately, the dendera relief captivates because it sits at the perfect crossroads. It is just realistic enough to spark doubt, yet just symbolic enough to be explained away. It challenges our linear view of progress, whispering that the path of invention might have strange, forgotten branches. Whether it depicts a spiritual dawn or a physical one, it forces a simple, haunting question. How much of what we call symbolic was once someone's practical, working blueprint for a world we no longer understand? The question of ancient illumination inevitably circles back to a small, unassuming clay pot. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq sits an artifact that could rewrite a chapter in the history of technology. Known as the Baghdad Battery, it was discovered in the 1930s near the ancient Parthian capital of Ctesiphon, dating to roughly 2,000 years ago. Its design is deceptively simple. A 6-inch tall clay jar contains a rolled copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt. Inside this cylinder sits an iron rod, also insulated from the copper by an asphalt plug at the top. If this jar were filled with an acidic electrolyte, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, a chemical reaction would occur. The iron rod would corrode, releasing electrons that would flow to the copper cylinder, creating a potential difference of about 1 volt. In essence, this humble pot becomes a primitive galvanic cell, a battery. The discovery is not singular. Several similar jars have been found. This raises the profound possibility that 2 millennia before Alessandro Volta's official invention, someone in Mesopotamia was tinkering with electricity. But to what end? A single volt is not enough to power a light, but it is precisely the kind of voltage used in a delicate, ancient craft, electroplating. The theory is elegant. A skilled artisan could suspend a small statue, perhaps made of copper or bronze, in a solution containing dissolved gold or silver salts. They would connect the statue to the copper terminal of the battery, making it the cathode. They would then connect a piece of pure gold to the iron rod, the anode. When the circuit was completed by immersing both in the solution, a fascinating transformation would begin. Positively charged gold ions in the solution would be attracted to the negatively charged statue. Slowly, atom by atom, a flawless, microscopically thin layer of precious metal would bond to its surface. The result would be a gilded object of breathtaking beauty, appearing to be solid gold but using only a fraction of the precious material. This was not magic, it was applied electrochemistry. The implications ripple outward. If this technology existed, even in a limited workshop setting, it represents a conceptual leap of staggering proportions. It means a culture we often associate with clay tablets and ziggurates possessed an intuitive grasp of ionic transfer, electrical circuits, and metallurgical bonding. They had moved beyond observing static electricity from amber or lightning and had begun to harness a controlled current for a practical, artistic purpose. This knowledge would have been immensely valuable, a closely guarded secret of temple workshops or royal craftsmen. The objects they produced, gleaming with sacred gold, would have been symbols of divine power and royal authority, objects meant to be transported in procession to awe and inspire. Could this understanding of current have bled into other areas? It is tempting to speculate. While there is no evidence it was used for motive power, the very concept of a flowing, invisible force might have influenced symbolic thought. If electricity could make a base metal resemble a god's metal, what other transformations might it enable? Ritual objects might have been designed with conductive materials in mind, or ceremonies might have incorporated the mysterious tingling sensation of a completed circuit as a form of divine contact. The battery in this light becomes more than a tool. It becomes a philosophical object, a bridge between the material and the mystical. Yet, the dominant scholarly view urges caution. Many archaeologists argue the jars were simply used for storage of sacred scrolls, with the iron and copper acting as protective rollers or seals. The asphalt plug, they say, was just a lid. The electrochemical properties might be an accidental byproduct of the materials chosen for durability. This is the core of the mystery. We have an object that functions perfectly as a battery, but we lack the smoking gun, the wires, the plated objects, or the textual instructions that would confirm its use. It exists in a vacuum, a brilliant answer searching for its question. This makes the Baghdad battery a poignant symbol of a different kind of transportation, the movement of ideas. It represents a spark of innovation that, for reasons we may never know, failed to catch fire and spread. It was a technological seedling that never grew into a tree. The knowledge, if it was knowledge, remained localized, perhaps lost in a war or with the death of a single master artisan. It is a haunting reminder that progress is not inevitable. Civilizations can discover profound truths and then let them slip through their fingers, leaving behind only enigmatic clay pots for future generations to puzzle over. This artifact challenges our arrogance. We look back and see a straight line from the past to our electrified present, but the Baghdad battery suggests the path was never that simple. It whispers of alternate histories, of sciences that bloomed in silence and died without echo, leaving us to wonder what other sparks have been extinguished by the long night of time. The silent spark of a forgotten battery suggests a world of unseen forces, but in a dusty tomb at Saqqara, another artifact points to a force humanity would not master for millennia: the sky. Catalogued simply as a bird figurine, this delicate wooden object, carved from sycamore around 200 BC, is anything but ordinary. At first glance, it has the sleek body and head of a falcon, a sacred animal in Egyptian mythology. But a closer look reveals a startling anomaly. Its tail is not horizontal like a bird's, but vertical and flat, precisely like the stabilizer fin on a modern airplane. This single, glaring design choice catapults the Saqqara bird from a simple toy into one of archaeology's most provocative mysteries. Birds in nature do not have vertical tail fins. Their tails are horizontal, used for steering and balance. A vertical fin, however, is an aerodynamic necessity for stable flight in a fixed-wing craft. It prevents unwanted yaw, the side-to-side swerving that would cause a glider to spiral out of control. This raises an electrifying question. Was the carver simply taking artistic license, or were they replicating something they had seen or even conceptualized? The artifact itself is small, with a wingspan of about 7 inches. It shows no signs of ever having had feathers painted on, and its underside is smooth, lacking the carved legs a bird model would typically have. In the late 1960s, Dr. Kolol Messiha, an Egyptian physician and aviation enthusiast, studied the object and became convinced it was a model glider. He noted its fuselage-like body and the angled dihedral of its wings, a feature that provides inherent stability in flight, much like a child's toy glider. The most compelling evidence, however, came from experimentation. Messiha and others built scaled-up, weighted replicas of the Saqqara bird, adding only a horizontal stabilizer, a small wing at the tail that the original lacks. When launched, these models reportedly flew. They exhibited stable gliding characteristics, capable of smooth flight for considerable distances when given an initial throw. This practical test transformed the artifact from a curious oddity into a potential blueprint. It suggests the shape itself, even without a modern understanding of physics, embodies aerodynamic principles that work. Of course, the mainstream archaeological interpretation is far more cautious. Many experts maintain it is a ceremonial object or a child's toy, likely a bird with a stylized tail. It could represent a weather vane or a boat's ornament. The absence of a horizontal stabilizer is a major point of contention for skeptics, who argue a true glider model would be useless without it. They propose the vertical tail could be a stylized bird's tail feather or simply a base to allow the object to stand upright. The truth is, we have no context. It was found among a miscellany of other wooden objects with no papyrus explaining its purpose. This silence is where speculation takes flight. Could Egyptian artisans, through endless observation of birds in flight, and perhaps even the flight of seeds like the sycamore seed from which the artifact is carved, have intuitively grasped the basics of lift and stability? Is it so impossible that a brilliant mind, watching a leaf spiral or a piece of cloth catch the wind, might have sketched or carved a concept for a manned glider? The materials certainly existed: lightweight wood and linen. This leads to the grand and highly speculative question at the heart of the mystery. Was the Saqqara bird part of a lost tradition of experimentation? We have myths from numerous cultures about flight, from Icarus to the Vimana flying chariots of Indian epics. These are typically dismissed as pure fantasy. But what if they are cultural echoes of real, if rudimentary, attempts to conquer the air? Perhaps a daring individual constructed a large linen and wood glider and launched themselves from a high dune or a temple platform. Such an experiment would likely have ended in injury or death, and the knowledge would have died with the experimenter, leaving behind only a cryptic model and a legend. The Saqqara bird then becomes a fossilized idea. It represents a transportation dream that leaped beyond the road, the river, and the sea, reaching for the domain of the gods themselves. It challenges our timeline of innovation, suggesting the dream of flight is not a modern obsession, but a primordial one. Whether it was a toy, a ritual object, or a model, its very existence proves that the shape of a wing, the concept of a fin, had been formulated in the human mind long before the Wright brothers walked the sands of Kitty Hawk. It is a whisper that the greatest journeys begin not with engines, but with a simple, soaring thought carved in wood. The dream of flight carved in wood gives way to a landscape where the earth itself was sculpted into a cathedral of stone. In the arid hills of southeastern Turkey, the discovery of Göbekli Tepe sent shockwaves through archaeology. Here, around 12,000 years ago, a people we classify as hunter-gatherers erected a series of monumental stone circles. At their heart are massive limestone T-shaped pillars, some standing 16 feet tall and weighing over 20 tons. These are not crude markers. They are meticulously carved with elaborate reliefs of animals, foxes, snakes, boars, and birds, a stunning menagerie frozen in time. The first staggering mystery is logistical. How did a society without agriculture, without permanent settlements, without the wheel or metal tools, quarry, transport, and erect these monoliths? The limestone bedrock was local, quarried from the surrounding plateau, but moving a 20-ton block even half a mile with only human muscle, ropes, and wooden levers represents a titanic communal effort. The leading theory is one of seasonal gathering. Göbekli Tepe may not have been a village but a regional cult center. Different clans or groups would converge at specific times of the year, perhaps during periods of abundance, to participate in its construction and use. The act of moving the stone then becomes the entire point. It was a ritualized, shared endeavor that forged social bonds and expressed a common belief system. Pulling a pillar from the earth and walking it to the hilltop was not a construction chore. It was a sacred procession, a physical pilgrimage that mirrored a spiritual ascent. Each inch gained was an offering, each heave of the rope a collective prayer. The transportation was the worship. This transforms our understanding of human motivation. The site suggests that the first great monumental works of humanity were not palaces or granaries, but temples, built by a shared spiritual need so powerful it could move literal mountains long before the plow was invented. The pillars, once raised, were then deliberately buried, filled in with rubble, as if their purpose was complete with the act of creation itself. The journey mattered more than the destination. A similar philosophy of sacred movement is etched across the wind-swept coast of Brittany. At Carnac in northwestern France, the landscape is punctuated by a forest of stone. Over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones, or menhirs, are arranged in staggering, parallel rows that stretch for miles. Walking among them is an experience of profound order and mystery. Unlike the concentrated circles of Göbekli Tepe, Carnac is linear, a vast open-air diagram. While their exact purpose remains debated, one of the most compelling theories is that these alignments were designed for ritual procession. Imagine a community gathering at the dawn of a solstice. They would form a line and begin to walk slowly between the towering rows of granite, their path physically dictated by the stones. The very act of walking this preordained corridor, perhaps from a village site toward a burial mound or a ceremonial enclosure, would have been a transformative experience. The rhythm of footsteps, the narrowing and widening of the avenues, the play of light and shadow between the stones, all worked to separate the participant from the mundane world. They were being transported not to a new location but into a different state of mind. The journey along the alignment was a rite of passage, a symbolic path from the profane to the sacred. The stones did not mark a boundary, they were the path. Some researchers suggest the alignments might also have served as a colossal astronomical calendar, with specific stones lining up with solar or lunar events. In this view, a procession on a specific day would literally walk into alignment with the cosmos, their movement on Earth syncing with the movement of the heavens. The transportation here is again deeply symbolic. The stones are not the monument the walking is. They are silent guides for a spiritual journey that was repeated for generations, wearing pathways not just in the earth, but in the collective memory of a people. Both Göbekli Tepe and Carnac whisper the same profound truth. The most enduring mysteries of ancient transportation are not about efficiency, but about meaning. They reveal that humans will undertake the hardest physical labor, move the heaviest objects, and walk the longest paths, not for conquest or commerce, but to touch something intangible. The greatest journeys, it seems, were always pilgrimages. From the processional stones of Carnac, we journey to a landscape where the vessels themselves have become the path. High on the plateaus of central Laos, the plain of jars presents a scene of serene bewilderment. Thousands of massive stone jars, some standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing several tons, lie scattered across rolling hills and meadows. Carved from sandstone and granite, their shapes are simple, functional, with a wide opening at the top and a rounded or pointed base. They are not arranged in neat rows or circles, but in clusters, as if placed with a purpose only they remember. The first question is one of creation. How were these gigantic containers, some taller than a person, hollowed out from solid rock? The sandstone could be worked with iron chisels, tools known to the Iron Age culture that likely created them over 2,000 years ago. But the granite jars pose a greater challenge, a stone so hard it would have required an immense investment of time and abrasion, grinding away the interior with sand and water over countless generations. Yet the greater mystery is their journey. The granite was not local to every site. Some of these multi-ton jars were quarried from mountainsides and transported, likely using log rollers, ropes, and teams of people across miles of rugged, forested terrain. What compelled such an effort? The leading theory, supported by human remains and burial artifacts found in and around some jars, is that they were part of an elaborate funerary practice. The jars may have been used to expose bodies to the elements, a form of sky burial, or to store cremated remains. In this light, the plain of jars transforms from a storage yard into a sacred necropolis. The act of moving the jar from quarry to hillside was not a logistical task, but the first step in a profound ritual. Imagine a funeral procession winding its way up from a village, carrying not just a body, but a sense of permanence. The deceased would be escorted to their final vessel, a stone womb that would cradle their remains for eternity. The jar's immobility, its rootedness to that specific spot on the plain, would have been essential. It marked a permanent portal between worlds, a fixed point for the living to visit and honor. But could their purpose have been more dynamic? Some researchers see the jar's placement along ancient trade routes and mountain passes as a clue. Were they giant rainwater cisterns, providing a vital, seasonal resource for caravans moving through the region? Or perhaps they were communal fermentation vats for brewing rice wine, used in large ceremonial gatherings that drew people from across the territory. This interpretation paints a picture of the jars as hubs of social and economic life, their transportation and placement designed to facilitate movement and connection across a challenging landscape. The truth may encompass both. They could have been funeral urns that also served as territorial markers or way stations, their solemn function intertwined with the practical rhythms of travel and trade. The jars stand as silent sentinels, not of a single answer, but of a complex relationship between the journey of the body, the journey of the spirit, and the journeys of the living across the land they shared with their ancestors. Far to the west, in the high Bolivian desert, another landscape was etched not with vessels, but with lines of breathtaking scope and precision. The Nazca Lines, named for the towering volcano they encircle, are a web of thousands of perfectly straight paths scraped into the dark surface of the Altiplano. Individually, they are simple, shallow trenches cleared of dark stones to reveal the lighter earth beneath. But collectively, they form a staggering geometric network covering an area larger than many modern cities. From the ground, you might see only a single, faint track vanishing into the distance, but from the air, the true grandeur is revealed, a vast, interconnected diagram that seems to map the territory itself. Their creation was a monumental act of communal labor, clearing stones along straight paths for miles, often up steep slopes with an unwavering commitment to linearity. The immediate question is one of navigation. Were these ancient roads, in a landscape with few landmarks, a perfectly straight line from a village to a water source or a grazing area, would be the most efficient travel guide imaginable? You could not get lost, simply follow the line. They may have served as pilgrimage routes toward the sacred Mount Sajama, a physical guide for a spiritual ascent. Yet, the sheer density of the network argues against simple point-to-point travel. There are lines that run parallel, lines that intersect at sharp angles, lines that lead to seemingly nowhere. This complexity suggests a purpose beyond mere footpaths. Many of the longest lines point directly toward the peaks of distant mountains or the rising and setting points of the sun during solstices. This has led to the compelling theory that the Sajama lines were a colossal astronomical calendar and ceremonial complex. Different lines could have been used by different communities to mark specific celestial events, their convergence points acting as gathering places for rituals tied to the agricultural cycle or the worship of mountain deities. The lines did not just guide movement, they choreographed it. A community might process along a specific line on the morning of the winter solstice, their footsteps tracing a path that aligned with the dawn sun, physically walking in harmony with the cosmos. The transportation here is again deeply symbolic. The lines are a permanent inscription of potential movement, a frozen script of journeys meant to be walked at specific times for specific reasons. They represent a society that saw the landscape not as empty space, but as a canvas for organizing time, faith, and community. Like the Plain of Jars, the Sajama lines are a massive investment in modifying the earth, not to build a monument you look at, but to create a system you move within. They are both puzzles of purpose, asking us what kind of journey is so important that it must be carved into the skin of the world itself. The lines we carve into the earth can be erased by time, but what if the greatest canvases of all now lie beneath the waves? Off the southern coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument emerges from the deep like a sleeping giant. This massive, terraced sandstone formation rests about 80 feet below the surface, a series of stark, geometric platforms, sharp 90-degree angles, and what appear to be straight, carved steps. To the trained eye of geologist Masaaki Kimura, these are not natural formations. He points to features that look like carved pillars, a star-shaped platform, and even a structure resembling a stadium. The most striking are the twin monoliths, two huge pillar-like rocks that seem to have been placed side by side with an almost ceremonial precision. If human hands shaped this, the implications are staggering. The monument would have been constructed on dry land, meaning its builders worked over 10,000 years ago before rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age submerged it. This would place its creation in a prehistoric era we have barely begun to understand, hinting at a sophisticated, seafaring culture in the Western Pacific long before any known civilization. The counter-argument from mainstream geology is firm and logical. Sandstone in this region naturally fractures along horizontal and vertical planes due to tectonic activity. The relentless pounding of ocean currents can erode these fractures into remarkably clean, stepped formations. The so-called staircase could simply be a series of these natural shelves, and the sharp angles a product of the stone's own bedding planes. There is no pottery, no tools, no definitive proof of human modification. Yet, the sheer scale and regularity give even skeptics pause. Could it be a natural formation that was later modified and used by ancient people? Perhaps it was a sacred quarry, a place where stone was taken for other structures now lost, leaving behind the negative space of a monument. The mystery deepens when we consider purpose. If it is artificial, what was it? A fortress, a religious complex, a docking facility for ships of a forgotten age? The terraced structure facing the open ocean does bear a haunting resemblance to ancient port installations found in the Mediterranean. Could those wide, flat platforms have been quays for vessels, and the straight channels between them roads for moving cargo? This transforms the site from a lonely ruin into a hub, a node in a network of travel and trade that vanished when the waters rose. It suggests a world where coastlines extended far beyond their current borders, and human settlements thrived on land that is now the continental shelf. The silence of Yonaguni is a profound echo of that lost world. A similar, sonar-generated ghost haunts the cold depths of the Baltic Sea. In 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters scanning the seafloor found an object that defied easy explanation. Their sonar image showed a nearly circular formation about 200 feet across, with a long, straight tail trailing behind. The object itself appeared to have sharp, geometric edges and, most intriguingly, what looked like a staircase leading down from its top. Dubbed the Baltic Sea anomaly, it instantly ignited global speculation. Was it a crashed UFO, a secret Nazi anti-submarine device, or the remnant of a lost ancient structure like Atlantis? Scientific analysis has since offered more grounded, though no less fascinating, possibilities. Subsequent scans by marine geologists suggest the object is most likely a glacial deposit. During the last ice age, massive glaciers scraped across the bedrock, picking up and transporting huge boulders. When the ice retreated, it could leave behind these isolated, often oddly shaped formations. The staircase effect could be a trick of sonar shadow and pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see familiar patterns in random shapes. The long tail is likely a natural sediment scour caused by currents. Yet, like Yonaguni, the anomaly's perfect circularity and sharp edges continue to fuel debate. Could it be a volcanic plug, a rare but natural formation of hardened magma? Or is there a slim chance it represents something else entirely? A megalithic structure drowned by post-glacial sea level rise. The Baltic region was dry land thousands of years ago, home to hunter-gatherers. The idea of a complex structure from that era seems improbable but not impossible. If it were a man-made dock or ceremonial platform, its location would have once been on a lakeshore or riverbank, a logical place for a settlement. The true mystery of the Baltic Sea anomaly may not be its origin, but what it represents about our relationship with the unknown depths. It is a Rorschach test on the seafloor, reflecting our deep desire to find lost civilizations beneath the waves. Both Yonaguni and the Baltic anomaly force us to confront a humbling geological truth. Sea levels have risen over 400 feet since the last glacial maximum. Vast habitable coastlines, equivalent to the size of continents, were swallowed by the ocean. If even a fraction of these sunken lands were home to human societies, their roads, their ports, their very footprints are now preserved only in the ambiguous language of stone and sonar. We are left searching for shadows, trying to decipher whether a straight line is a human road or a geological joint, a staircase for people or a shelf for fish. These underwater puzzles are the ultimate transportation mystery because they ask us to consider journeys that can no longer be taken, across landscapes that no longer exist, to destinations we can only imagine in the silent blue dark. Our search for lost landscapes now turns to objects so strange they seem to have fallen from the sky or another time entirely. These are the out-of-place artifacts, items that appear technologically impossible for their supposed age. Two of the most famous and fiercely debated are the Dropa stones and the Koso artifact. Their stories push the transportation mystery to its absolute limit, suggesting not just lost human knowledge, but visitors from beyond our world or our timeline. The tale of the Dropa stones begins in 1938, when a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pute reportedly discovered a series of neat, circular stone discs in a remote mountain cave. The discs, about 9 inches across, each had a small hole in the center and a fine, double-spiraling groove etched from the rim to the hole. More astonishingly, this groove was said to contain a line of tiny, unknown hieroglyphic characters. The story, which first reached the West in the 1960s, claimed that when the script was finally decoded, it revealed a catastrophic narrative. It told of a spacecraft from a distant star that crashed in the mountains. The survivors, a people called the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and were stranded on Earth, eventually intermingling with local tribes. The stones were their recorded history. It is a compelling science fiction premise, but virtually every element of the story unravels under scrutiny. No reputable museum has ever displayed or catalogued a Dropa stone. The original archaeologist Kai Pu-te cannot be verified in academic records. The man who first published the translation, a Russian researcher named Tsum Amnui, is similarly elusive. Mainstream archaeology dismisses the entire account as an elaborate hoax or a modern myth that grew from the misidentification of common by discs, ancient Chinese jade artifacts with a center hole, which were sometimes buried in groups. Yet the story persists with a remarkable vitality. It taps directly into the ancient astronaut hypothesis, the idea that extraterrestrials visited Earth in prehistory and influenced human development. In this framework, the Dropa stones become the ultimate transportation artifact, not of human movement, but of an interstellar journey that ended in our distant past. They represent the fantasy of a vehicle so advanced it could cross the void between stars, and a record of its tragic, final voyage. A different kind of temporal dislocation is claimed for the Coso artifact. In 1961, 3 rockhounds in California's Coso Mountains were searching for geodes, the round, hollow stones that often contain beautiful crystal interiors. When they cut open one promising find, they discovered not crystals, but what appeared to be a modern mechanical device. At its center was a metal rod with a hexagonal head like a machine screw. It was surrounded by a ceramic ring, and the whole assembly was encased in a hardened clay shell. The object bore a striking resemblance to a spark plug from an early 20th century engine. The mystery exploded when the finders sent it to a geologist, who allegedly examined the crusty outer layer and declared it to be a geode that had taken at least 500,000 years to form. The implication was staggering: a man-made spark plug sealed inside a stone 500,000 years old. The conclusion seemed inescapable to some, evidence of a technologically advanced civilization in deep prehistory, or perhaps a time traveler who left a piece of his vehicle behind. But science soon provided more plausible explanations. Independent investigators, including the late skeptic Pierre Stromerck, tracked down a likely match. The object closely resembled a champion spark plug from the early 1920s, a type used in Model T Fords and early mining equipment. The so-called geode casing was not a natural stone formation at all, but a concretion of hardened mud and rust that had accumulated around the lost spark plug, perhaps in a wet environment. Such concretions can form relatively quickly, in decades, not millennia. The original geological assessment was likely flawed or misrepresented. The Coso artifact is almost certainly a 20th century object that underwent a rapid, natural process of incrustation, not a relic from a forgotten age of machine. So why do these stories, so easily debunked by experts, continue to captivate? They represent the ultimate expression of our transportation mysteries. When faced with the profound achievements of the ancient world, the moved monoliths and precise astronomy, a part of us longs for a simpler, more spectacular answer. It is easier to imagine a spaceship depositing knowledge or a time-traveling spark plug than to fully grapple with the slow, grinding, collective genius of humanity across thousands of years. These out-of-place artifacts are cultural pressure valves. They allow us to externalize the wonder, to attribute the unexplained to an outside force. They transform the mystery of human transportation into a mystery of visitation. In the end, the Dropa stones and the Coso artifact are less about archaeology and more about psychology. They are monuments to our own disbelief, our occasional reluctance to give our ancestors full credit for their quiet, earthbound miracles. They remind us that the most powerful vehicle in any mystery is not a stone disc or a spark plug, but the human imagination itself, forever traveling to the edges of the possible, searching for a sign that we are not alone on this long, winding road through time. The fantasy of lost technology fades before a reality far more profound. Across the vast, open heart of the Pacific Ocean, the greatest mystery of transportation was solved not with machines but with memory. The Polynesian navigators did not possess tools we have lost. They possessed a knowledge so deeply woven into their world that it rendered the greatest ocean on Earth a familiar, navigable road. Their vessel was the double-hulled canoe, or wakolua, a masterpiece of maritime engineering lashed together with coconut fiber. These were not fragile rafts, but stable, swift ships capable of carrying families, livestock, and the hope of a new home across thousands of miles of open sea. They had no magnetic compass, no sextant, no written charts. Their instruments were the stars, the waves, the wind, and the flight of birds. This was wayfinding, a living science passed down through chance and apprenticeships, and it represents perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of natural navigation ever achieved. The first and most constant guide was the star compass. Unlike our Western constellations, Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, creating a mental map of the night sky that was fixed to the horizon. They knew that certain stars acted as steering marks for specific destinations. A star called Hokulea, our Arcturus, pointed directly to the Hawaiian archipelago. As one star rose too high or set, the navigator would simply shift to another rising from the same point, holding a celestial course through the night. But the stars were only part of the story. During the day or under overcast skies, they read the ocean itself. They became experts in wave piloting. A seasoned navigator could feel the dominant swell pattern generated by distant trade winds, a deep, rolling rhythm that provided a constant directional baseline. When a canoe passed near an island, even one still below the horizon, the swells would refract and bounce, creating a subtle interference pattern on the water's surface. The navigator, lying in the hull, could feel these minute changes through the motion of the canoe, sensing the island's presence long before he could see it. They watched the clouds. A stationary pile of clouds on the horizon often indicated an island beneath them, as the landmass forced warm, moist air upward to form cumulus. The color of the sky and sea changed too, with the reflection of shallow lagoons casting a greenish hue on the undersides of clouds, a phenomenon called sea glint. Then there were the messengers of the air. The navigators knew the habits of specific seabirds intimately. Certain species, like the golden plover or the fairy tern, fly out from land to fish each day but must return to their nests at night. Spotting these birds at dusk and noting the direction of their flight provided a reliable arrow pointing toward land that might be over 100 miles away. Even the composition of flotsam, the types of branches or seeds floating in the water, could tell them how far they were from a particular island group. All this knowledge was stored not in books but in epic chants and stories. A master navigator, or PWO, would spend decades learning from a teacher, memorizing star paths, swell patterns, and the sequences of islands. This oral tradition was a living database, constantly refined and validated by successful voyages. The true scale of their achievement is almost beyond comprehension. Using these methods, Polynesians settled islands across a triangle of ocean spanning from Hawaii in the north to Easter Island in the east to New Zealand in the southwest, an area larger than the continent of Asia. Each voyage was a leap of faith into the unknown, a deliberate exploration into the emptiness driven by overpopulation, resource scarcity, or simply the human urge to see what lies beyond the horizon. They were not lost, they were searching. This mystery inverts the ones we have seen before. It is not about a forgotten gadget or a vanished machine. It is about a cognitive map, a way of seeing the world that turned environmental chaos into a coherent, actionable system. They transported entire cultures across the Pacific, not by conquering nature, but by listening to it with a depth of attention we have largely forgotten. Their canoes carried more than people. They carried an entire worldview, one in which the sea was not a barrier, but a pathway etched in stars, waves, and wings. The silent mastery of Polynesian wayfinding stands in stark contrast to a small, enigmatic object that refuses to reveal its purpose. Scattered across the former Roman Empire from Britain to Hungary are curious artifacts known as Roman dodecahedra. Each one is a hollow bronze object roughly the size of a large fist, featuring 12 flat pentagonal faces. Every face contains a circular hole of varying diameter, and at each of the 20 corners sits a small knob. Over 100 of these have been unearthed, yet not a single written record, carving, or painting from the Roman era mentions them. They are a perfect blank in history, a puzzle cast in bronze. The range of theories is as varied as it is imaginative. Some have suggested they were decorative candlestick holders, though wax residue is rarely found. Others propose they were dice for an elaborate game, or even knitting tools for making gloves. Each guess feels unsatisfying, failing to explain the precision of the craftsmanship or the standardized, yet varying, hole sizes. The mystery deepens when you hold one. It feels purposeful, engineered. This has led to a compelling transportation-related hypothesis. Could the Roman dodecahedron be a sophisticated measuring device? Imagine a Roman surveyor, part of the vast logistical machine that built 50,000 miles of straight roads across 3 continents. His task is to plan a new road or standardize the construction of a fort. One theory suggests the dodecahedron was a range-finding tool for the military. A soldier could peer through different holes, aligning knobs on the device with a distant object like an enemy on a wall. By knowing which hole provided the correct alignment, and by using a standardized set of measurements tied to the device, he could calculate the distance. This information would be crucial for artillery, determining the correct angle for a ballista or catapult to strike its target. Accurate range-finding transformed warfare from guesswork into a calculated science, allowing Roman forces to project power efficiently across any terrain. But the utility could extend far beyond the battlefield. The same principle could be applied to peaceful construction. Surveyors plotting a road or an aqueduct needed to measure distances and calculate elevations with remarkable accuracy. A device that could visually gauge distance using geometric principles would be invaluable. By sighting through the holes toward a measuring rod held by an assistant a known distance away, a surveyor might use the proportions to determine longer distances or height. The different hole sizes could correspond to different measurement scales or units. This turns the dodecahedron from a trinket into a key piece of the Roman logistical toolkit, a portable computer for translating the landscape into buildable plans. It embodies the Roman genius for standardization and system. Their empire was a network held together by the movement of legions, goods, and ideas. That movement depended on consistent measurement. Whether determining the pace of a marching column, the load of a supply wagon, or the span of a bridge, standardized tools were essential. The dodecahedron, in this light, becomes a symbol of that invisible framework. It is not the road itself, but the device that helped conceive the road's path. It represents the planning stage of all transportation, the moment before the first stone is laid, when the journey exists only as a calculation in a surveyor's eye. Yet, without a manual or a clear depiction of its use, the theory remains a shadow on the wall of history. Perhaps its very mystery is the point. It reminds us that the Romans were not just soldiers and engineers, but also craftsmen and thinkers who solved problems with elegant, three-dimensional logic. We can see the enduring results of their work in the crumbling roads and towering aqueducts, but the small, clever tools that made it all possible have mostly turned to dust. The dodecahedra that survive are the rare exceptions, silent and stubborn, holding the shape of a question we may never fully answer. They challenge us to look at the ancient world not as a collection of grand monuments, but as a civilization built on countless small, brilliant innovations, most of which traveled through time only to disappear without a trace. While Roman surveyors might have puzzled over their bronze dodecahedrons, an emperor in ancient China possessed a carriage that seemed to defy logic. Known as the south-pointing chariot, it was not a magnetic device but a purely mechanical marvel. On its roof stood a small, ornate figure of a man, his arm perpetually extended toward the south. No matter how the chariot twisted and turned through the imperial gardens or on a procession, the figure would slowly, automatically rotate on its platform, its finger never wavering from its true bearing. This was not magic, but mathematics made manifest in wood and bronze, an analog computer on wheels invented centuries before the magnetic compass became common. The heart of its mystery beats within a sealed box beneath the statue, housing one of history's earliest and most brilliant applications of differential gearing. The chariot's two wheels were not simply attached to an axle. Each wheel was connected to its own vertical axle that turned a central gear inside the sealed compartment. The genius lay in how these gears interacted. When the chariot moved in a straight line, both wheels turned at the same speed, and the gears worked in unison, causing no net movement in the statue above. But when the chariot turned, the wheels rotated at different speeds. The outside wheel had to cover more ground than the inside one. This difference in rotation was captured by the differential gear train. The system automatically calculated the angle of the turn and transmitted a compensating rotation to the statue, turning it just enough in the opposite direction to cancel out the chariot's change in orientation. It was a closed-loop feedback system, a mechanical brain that constantly corrected for error. To achieve this with the precision required, using only hand-filed gears and wooden pegs, represents a summit of ancient engineering. The conceptual leap is staggering. It means Chinese mechanists over 2,000 years ago understood principles of relative motion and compensation that would not be formally rediscovered in the West for over a millennium. They had essentially invented a mechanical integrator, a device that could track cumulative changes in direction. This raises the profound question at the center of the mystery. Why was this breathtaking technology seemingly confined to the emperor's court? Historical records describe the south-pointing chariot as a ceremonial object, a dazzling proof of imperial sophistication and cosmic alignment. It led grand processions, a symbol that the Son of Heaven, like the chariot's figure, was eternally oriented toward order and harmony, but its practical potential was immense. Imagine such a mechanism, scaled down and ruggedized, mounted on the lead wagon of a merchant caravan setting out on the Silk Road. In the featureless expanse of the Gobi Desert, with no stars visible in a dust storm, such a device could provide a constant, reliable heading. It would have revolutionized overland navigation, making long-distance trade safer and more predictable. So why did this not happen? The answer may lie in the very nature of imperial power. Extraordinary technologies were often state secrets, hoarded by the court to enhance its own majesty and control. The chariot was a treasure, not a tool. Its complexity made it fragile and expensive, unsuitable for the rough realities of common travel. Furthermore, China's cosmological world, you placed the emperor at the center of a fixed, orderly universe. A device that mechanically enforced southern orientation reinforced that ideology perfectly. For practical navigation, other methods like star charts and landmark knowledge were sufficient and far less costly. The chariot thus stands as a poignant what-if of history. It was a spark of genius that never ignited a wider fire. It shows that a civilization can reach a technological peak in isolation, creating a device so advanced it seems anachronistic, yet choose not to pursue its broader implications. The south-pointing chariot was not a stepping stone, but a solitary monument. It whispers of a different path not taken, where mechanical computation guided travelers across continents long before the magnetic needle ever swung north. Beneath the familiar landscapes of Europe and South America lies a hidden world of shadow and stone. Legends speak of vast, winding tunnels stretching for miles, silent arteries carved deep into the earth. In Bavaria and Austria, farmers have for centuries stumbled upon strange, narrow passages called Erdstall tunnels. These are not natural caves. They are human-made, with low, rounded ceilings barely high enough to crawl through, connecting small chambers and often ending in tight, bottleneck closures. Their purpose is utterly unknown. They are too cramped for comfortable habitation, show no signs of storage, and are absent of artifacts or remains. Their construction, however, is a feat of persistence. Dug through solid earth and rock with nothing more than antler picks and stone shovels, they represent a colossal underground effort with no clear reward. Were they refuges from raiders, allowing a community to vanish from the surface world? Perhaps they were spiritual passages, symbolic journeys through the underworld for initiation rites. The sheer physical difficulty of navigating them, crawling in pitch darkness, suggests their value was not in convenience, but in the profound experience of the journey itself. This mystery of cramped, cryptic tunnels finds a grander, more terrifying echo across the ocean. In South America, the legends are not of small crawl spaces, but of majestic subterranean highways. Spanish chroniclers wrote of Inca tales describing a vast network called the Cueva de los Teos, a labyrinthine world of immense galleries and rivers flowing in eternal night. These were said to be roads for a forgotten people, or perhaps secret paths for the swift movement of the Inca army. The stories speak of treasures and libraries of metal plates hidden in the depths, guarded for millennia. While these accounts are steeped in myth, modern exploration has confirmed the existence of staggering natural cave systems, like those in Ecuador that stretch for miles. Did ancient cultures simply utilize and modify these existing geological wonders? The archaeological evidence here is tantalizing but thin. Some tunnels show signs of tool marks and enlargement. Others have yielded a handful of artifacts suggesting periodic use. Yet, the idea of a continent-spanning, engineered subway system remains in the realm of folklore. The practical challenges are immense. Excavating long, stable tunnels without modern supports is an engineering nightmare. Ventilation, lighting, and navigation in complete darkness would have been constant, deadly struggles. A single tunnel used for moving troops or goods would require an army of torch-bearers and a sophisticated understanding of airflow to prevent suffocation. This leads to the most likely truth, a blend of practicality and profound belief. Shorter, functional tunnels certainly existed for water management, mining, or as secret escape routes from temples during siege. The legendary vast networks, however, probably grew in the telling, transforming remembered journeys through a few interconnected caves into epic sagas of a hidden world. They represent a deep human fascination with the earth below, a realm associated with ancestors, spirits, and raw power. To travel underground was to move through a sacred space, a transportation that was as much about spiritual transformation as physical relocation. These tunnels, whether real or imagined, force us to look down. They suggest that for our ancestors, the most important journeys might not have been across the horizon, but beneath their very feet, into the dark heart of the world they sought to understand. The dark, silent world beneath our feet is a place of mystery, but the human imagination has always reached for the opposite realm, the boundless sky. In the ancient epics of India, this longing takes a spectacular, tangible form. The Mahabharata and the Ramayana, texts composed over 2 millennia ago, are not just stories of gods and heroes. They are filled with intricate descriptions of vehicles that defy the earth itself, the Vimanas. These are not vague, poetic clouds. They are described with a startling specificity that has echoed through centuries, blurring the line between sacred myth and forgotten science. The word Vimana simply means a measured-out space, a chariot, but in these texts it becomes something far more. They are flying palaces, celestial cars, and sometimes formidable weapons of war. In the Mahabharata, the hero Arjuna is taken on a journey in a brilliant, sun-like chariot piloted by his divine charioteer, a vehicle capable of traversing incredible distances and dimensions. Other passages describe Vimanas as multi-storied structures, circular or cylindrical in shape, made of iron, copper, or lead. They are said to be powered by the energy of the sky or by mercury and heated engines roaring into the air with a sound like thunder, leaving trails of smoke and fire. Some accounts even detail aerial battles between these craft, with weapons that sound unnervingly modern, projectiles of sheer energy that could seek their target, and beams of light that could reduce entire cities to ash. The level of detail is what captivates and confounds. It is one thing to say a god flew. It is another to describe the materials of his vessel, the sound of its propulsion, and the tactics of its deployment. This vividness has led a minority of researchers and a wave of popular speculation to ask a radical question. Could these stories be a cultural memory of a lost, advanced technological age? The proponents of this view, often associated with the ancient astronaut theory, point to the technical language. Descriptions of mercury vortex engines, for instance, have been linked by some to speculative concepts like ion propulsion or gyroscopic stabilization. The mention of specific metals and crystalline viewing screens feels, to them, less like fantasy and more like a garbled transmission from a prehistoric workshop. They argue that over millennia, the understanding of the technology was lost, and what remained was mythologized, the pilots becoming gods, the machines becoming magical chariots. The mainstream academic and historical view, however, firmly places the Vimana in the realm of literature and theology. Scholars of Sanskrit and Indian history explain these descriptions as brilliant metaphorical constructs. In a spiritual tradition that values transcendence, the journey of the soul is often described as an ascent. What better metaphor for spiritual elevation, for breaking the bonds of the material world, than a magnificent flying vehicle? The Vimana is the ultimate symbol of divine power and mobility, a narrative device to illustrate the superhuman nature of the epic characters. The detailed descriptions serve a literary purpose to create awe and verisimilitude within the story's own logic, much like a modern science fiction author might invent plausible technobabble to ground a fantastical tale. The weapons described are amplifications of the era's own military technology, catapults and fire arrows, elevated to a cosmic scale to match the epic conflict. Furthermore, we have no archaeological evidence, no buried engines, no ancient landing strips, no residue of advanced alloys that would corroborate a literal interpretation. The absence of such physical proof is a significant hurdle. So why do these stories emerge with such power? The answer may lie in a profound human impulse. Before we built airplanes, we dreamed of flight. We watched birds and imagined joining them. We looked at the sun and moon and dreamed of travel. The Vimana myths represent that universal dream, codified and elaborated within a rich cultural and religious framework. They are a testament to the power of the human mind to conceptualize solutions to its greatest limitations. They take the fundamental mystery of transportation, how to move from here to there, and project it onto the ultimate canvas, the sky. In doing so, they perform a fascinating alchemy. They transform a physical desire into a spiritual metaphor, and in their intricate detail, they preserve for us not a blueprint for a machine, but a blueprint for wonder. The Vimana does not need to have been real to have moved humanity. It traveled through stories, inspiring awe for generations, and in that journey through imagination, it achieved a different kind of flight altogether. The Vimana's flight of imagination lands upon a sheet of parchment that threatens to upend our entire historical map. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, a fragment of a world map drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis holds one of geography's most explosive secrets. The map itself is a beautiful artifact showing the Atlantic Ocean with the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and critically, the eastern shores of South America. But it is the landmass curling around the bottom of the page that ignites the firestorm. Piri Reis labeled it, but its shape is hauntingly familiar to modern eyes. To many who study it, that landmass bears an uncanny and seemingly impossible resemblance to the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 300 years. And it is depicted not as a frozen wasteland, but with mountains, rivers, and a topography that suggests a land free of ice. The implications, if true, are not just puzzling, they are revolutionary. How could a 16th century Ottoman admiral, working with the best knowledge of his time, possibly have charted a continent hidden beneath a mile-thick ice sheet for millennia? The mapmaker himself provides a clue in his extensive notes. Piri Reis wrote that he compiled his map from numerous source charts, including some that were very old, dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He specifically mentions consulting maps drawn by explorers who had visited these distant lands. This admission is the heart of the mystery. It suggests Piri Reis was not inventing this southern continent, but copying it from much older, pre-existing maps that themselves depicted a world as it existed in a far more ancient era. The most staggering scientific support for this idea comes from modern geology. We now know that Antarctica was last ice-free, with flowing rivers and exposed coastlines not thousands but millions of years ago. The last period when its coasts could have been mapped as they appear on the Piri Reis fragment was during a warm interglacial period roughly 6,000 years ago. This timeline is catastrophic for conventional history. It implies that a sophisticated, seafaring civilization capable of global exploration and precise cartography existed in deep prehistory, mapped the Antarctic coastline, and then vanished, leaving only fragments of its knowledge to be copied and preserved by later cultures like the Ottomans. This civilization would have needed to understand spherical trigonometry to project coastlines accurately onto a flat map, a skill not mastered in the West until centuries after Piri Reis. The map's accuracy regarding South America is itself notable, showing the Amazon and the Plate River with surprising fidelity. But it is the Antarctic claim that separates scholarly debate from popular legend. Mainstream historians and cartographers offer a more conservative, though still fascinating, interpretation. They argue the controversial landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a speculative, distorted continuation of the South American coast, a common cartographic practice of the era where unexplored regions were filled with guesswork. The apparent accuracy, they say, is a combination of coincidence and the fact that Piri Reis had access to newly acquired Portuguese charts from their voyages down the Brazilian coast. The topographic details could represent the Patagonian region, wildly misshapen and placed too far south. The mountains and rivers are artistic conventions, not accurate surveys. They point out that the map is filled with known errors and fantastical creatures, placing it firmly within the context of early 16th century mapmaking, a blend of emerging fact and enduring myth. The ice-free aspect is the easiest to dismiss, they argue, because the mapmaker had no concept of polar ice caps. He simply drew land as he imagined it, or as it was depicted in his sources, without any notation of glacial cover. Yet the ghost of those ancient sources refuses to be quieted. If Piri Reis was merely guessing, why did his guess so closely match a reality he could not have known? The debate ultimately hinges on a single, profound question about the transmission of knowledge. Are we looking at a lucky artistic fluke, or are we seeing the faint, water-stained fingerprint of a lost age of exploration? The Piri Reis map forces us to consider a world where the great voyages of Columbus and Magellan were not the beginning, but a rediscovery. It suggests the globe may have been charted long before recorded history, and that our modern maps are not a first draft, but a palimpsest drawn over the faded lines of masters whose names we will never know. The map fragment sits in its museum case, a silent continent at its edge, waiting for us to decide if it is a cartographic error or the most important relic of a world we forgot. From the stones of Stonehenge to the charts of Antarctica, the ancient world is a tapestry of transportation mysteries that challenge our understanding of human capability. Our journey has taken us across continents and millennia, through 30 enigmas that span the raw power of engineering, the silent language of navigation, and the soaring realms of mythology. We have seen monoliths that walked and stones that swam, maps of lands that should not have been known, and gears that calculated the cosmos long before the age of computers. Each mystery, from the copper that vanished from Lake Superior to the silent, staring moai of Easter Island, represents a question mark carved into the timeline of human ingenuity. These are not mere gaps in our knowledge, but profound conversations with the past, where every unexplained block or uncharted line asks us to reconsider what we think we know about our ancestors. They were not primitive, they were pioneers operating with a different set of tools and an utterly different worldview, yet achieving feats that still leave us breathless. While science continues its work, and new discoveries may one day solve puzzles like the purpose of the Roman dodecahedron or the true nature of the Yonaguni monument, we must also make peace with the possibility that some secrets are meant to stay buried. Some whispers from the past may forever remain just that, echoes in stone and legend, reminding us that history is not a closed book with all the answers in the back, but an ongoing investigation, a living story we are still piecing together. This is where you come in. Which of these 30 mysteries captured your imagination the most? Was it the mechanical genius of the south-pointing chariot, the celestial guidance of the Viking sunstone, or the haunting, sunken pathways of Nan Madol? Share your favorite in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation. If you enjoyed this voyage into the unknown, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest puzzles. There are always more roads to walk, more stars to follow, and more secrets waiting just beneath the surface. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.